everyone, and welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today is our first Q&A of 2022. You know how this works. You guys submit your questions to us either on YouTube or on the Discord, or sometimes by email, and we pick some of them and we answer them. So without further ado, let's go.
Sometimes we're funny.
Yeah. So the first one, hey Pat and Phil, I'm a beginner and my gun isn't working well. It seems like it's skipping shots and sometimes it will fire 2 BBs instead of 1. What is going on? I have never done any tech work before and I'm a bit scared to start. Any advice would be appreciated. So I mean, Pat is going to probably be the one who's more, appropriate to answer this question. Although I will say this is similar to a problem that I've had for many, many years over the course of many different guns. And I think many airsofters can relate to that for sure.
Definitely. And so the answer is going to be slightly complicated. But the first thing I want to get it to is, so you're going to, if you've Googled that, you've gotten 42 answers that involve taking your gun apart, and some that involve like filing down parts of your gun. Don't do those yet. Problems in airsoft, like you really want to, when you're looking at tech work problems, deal with them via some triage and via the sort of like, what is the least invasive, most logical problem? And for what you've just described, the least invasive, most logical problem is, do you have some friends with different magazines you can try? Because if the magazines aren't seating quite right, aren't feeding quite right, because this is airsoft and they're made out of cheese, the quality is very low often in terms of consistency, then switching to a different mag may just resolve the issue for you completely. And that is both the least invasive and cheapest solution by far, assuming that it works.
And assuming you're buying cheap mags.
Well, I mean, yes. But like, it's one of those things where if you have a friend who can toss you another couple of different types of mags, if you're running, say, an M4 to try, great. If you're running a P90, well, there's pretty much only one kind of P90 mag, so that may not work out for you.
Yeah.
Right?
I think, too, one of the things that I had noticed is that the way that you perceive the problem is important as well. So for a while on my old VL tour, I had this issue where when my mags were fully loaded, I would be skipping shots or I would be double feeding. But then as I burned through some of the mag, and let's say I was down to, 40 rounds, something like that in a 80 round mid cap, then I didn't have the problem anymore. And that was due to spring tension in the mag. It was pushing too hard against my hop up and it was causing the BBs to actually just like jam in there and not cycle properly and all this kind of stuff. So like Pat was saying, check your mags first. That should be your very, very first step. Because like you said, I mean, it's very easy to test as well, right? Maybe your mags don't work and maybe your friend's mags don't even work, but someone else has like a PTS E-mag or, one of the polymer mags, and you try that and it works fine, right? So there could be a mag out there that actually works much better for your needs and you just need to find what it is.
Yep. And that can be a really simple solution. If that isn't the situation, and like you don't try it, you can try what Phil just suggested, soft loading your mags so you've got like 60 rounds in your 80 round mid cap or 80 rounds in your 140 round mid cap, whatever, so that you're not pushing as hard on the rounds that you're trying to chamber into your hop up unit. That will potentially resolve the issue as well. If neither of those works, the first thing I would do is look at your hop up unit, take it apart, take the rubber out. Again, that's relatively non-invasive. Check your barrel, clean your barrels. If you're using, a few years ago, a bunch of my teammates used really cheap bio BBs that were extraordinarily bad. And partway through the season, all of their guns were not working right. And it was literally as simple as we had to take the barrels out of all of them and actually give them a really thorough cleaning because the BBs had left a ton of residue. So check your barrel, make sure your barrel's clean, check your hop-up unit, make sure you, say, have a decent hop-up rubber in there, because that can cause these sorts of issues, especially if, like, it, if it was built at the factory by someone who didn't really care that day and they jammed it in there and there's, like, a buckle in the rubber, like, it folded over itself a little. All right, or if you did it and you don't know what you're doing and you're new to doing this and you'd caused that, because I've definitely done that. Like, get in there is not actually a very good solution to airsoft tech work, but we all have those days.
And the problem is too, like, you don't discover that it's a problem until later, right? So you jam it in there thinking everything is fine, and you test fire it in your basement. Maybe you do in 2-3 shots, or you do a couple of dry fires, and that's not really enough to find out that there's actually an issue there.
Yeah,
right?
well, like one of the shitty things about test firing, in my basement, as we've done a ton with your gun in the last 2 years, is just like, it's going to look fine over 10 feet. Like the trajectory on an airsoft BB is going to look absolutely fine over 10 feet if everything's even sort of working.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, there are situations where that's a perfectly adequate test for my immediate purposes. Usually I these days just I have a chronograph, so that helps resolve that issue. But especially since we're talking to a hypothetical beginner here, you probably don't. If you do, that shouldn't have been one of your first purchases. But like rad, it'll help you out with teching.
Yeah, definitely.
Super useful.
And so I think once you've gotten out of the obvious things that you can do, the easy things that you can do. And I mean, I would say that taking out your barrel might seem a little bit daunting to a beginner, but if you look at a video, it's quite easy to do. Like it's really like a 5-minute job. Like it's super straightforward.
And, speaking as a clumsy idiot, you're super unlikely to break it. Like,
yeah. Everything is possible. Don't take that to the bank, but like it's really quite straightforward.
Yeah, exactly. Do not try to break it based on that statement. You will succeed. But yeah, from there, honestly, my advice is if you are having like multiple feeds because of something in your gun, and you've tried a couple of different mags, and you've tried, taking a mid cap and loading it with only like 30 or 60 rounds and seeing how that works, and you've done the things I've just suggested, and it is still not working right. Honestly, join our Discord, pop onto our Discord, talk to myself and the other excellent techs there who will give you a hand, or message me, and I'll talk you through it, because you probably at that point are looking at installing a delayer chip, or like maybe you've put a really like super juiced up battery in there and it's double cycling because you don't have a MOSFET in there. There are 1,001 different possible problems, and there's a point at which it's like you probably want to at least talk to a tech, or if you have a tech in your community who you get on well with, who will do the work for you, and who's trustworthy, fire it at them, let them figure it out. If you can manage to talk them into showing you what they're doing while they're doing it, that's bueno, because it gives you the ability to start working on developing those skills yourself. I mean, one of the funny things about the saga of Phil's gun, which we resolved by the fact that he's got a different gun now, but I still have Phil's gun, so its saga continues for me because I am stubborn and require it to function before I let it out of my house. I'm pretty sure I've actually resolved the issue. I'm equally pretty much sure that the issue was that the gearbox we were using actually doesn't fit very well in specifically GNP bodies, and that a new gearbox will resolve the issue. That's on my list of things to do when I finish marking term papers. But yeah, there are so many possible outcomes, and so many of them are like finicky and fiddly, that talking to someone about it's probably a good idea.
Totally. And like one of the things that, if you don't want to join the Discord, you don't want to have that sort of hands-on help, because really, I mean, quite frankly, we're just strangers on the internet. That's totally fair enough, right? But one of the challenges... Find local weirdos. Well, the thing is, like, you say in your comment, like, you're scared to try doing your own tech work. Like, you're scared to open the gearbox. Like, to be honest, you shouldn't be scared. Like, I think it's daunting, but there's a lot of really good resources. And I mean, we have a video on it, but there's tons of resources out there that are really excellent that will show you how to get into the gearbox. The problem is that even if you do that, you don't really have the knowledge to diagnose what actually is happening. You can watch tons of different videos about how gearboxes work and all this kind of stuff. But when you open up your own gearbox, you might not have the know-how or the knowledge to understand what in there is actually causing your issue. So for example, I remember many, many years ago when my gun was having this issue, we would open the gearbox and we didn't understand what the issue was and all this kind of stuff. And it was because two things that existed in the gearbox had basically disintegrated. But when we looked at it, we couldn't actually perceive those things because we didn't really realize that they were there in the first place. One of which was a delayer chip on is it the sector gear that the delayer chip goes on?
Yep.
So the sector gear had basically evaporated, like it had exploded inside the gearbox, but we didn't know that it was there in the first place. So that was one thing. And then there was a piece of metal that held in the, I think it was the shuttle for the trigger contacts, I think, or something like that.
That had been just broken off.
Yeah, and it was sheared clean off, and it was flush and flat. So looking at it, we're like, doesn't seem like there's anything here.
Yeah, there was a point where we were working on it where I was looking and I was like, hang on. There's supposed to be something there. I was looking at one of these like 2 days ago and just grabbed one of the gearbox shells that I had around and went, yep, that is a real problem. But the reality is like, hey, I had the part to look at, right?
Yeah, and unless you have the know-how or, like in this particular case, like the part to do the comparison with, like you're not going to know what to do. So absolutely, like, yeah, you can be nervous or scared about opening your gearbox. That's fine. But even if you do that, is that really going to serve anything for you, for your own purposes? Like, I mean, you're not going to be able to diagnose your own problem, more than likely. And so if you have the option to work with the tech that or, hop on the Discord or whatever, but like consult with someone who can share and impart some of that knowledge to you, that would be great. Because that's the reason that I work with Pat all the time. Because can I open and disassemble my airsoft gun by myself? Like, absolutely I can. I think Pat will vouch for the fact that I'm competent enough to take down a gearbox. Do I know what to do when I get in there? Like, no, I don't. Like, yeah, if you ask me to swap the spring or whatever, like, sure, I can do that. But if it's diagnosing, and I mean, we have the evidence of that over the last 2 years, diagnosing what's going on with my gun, like, I'm useless because I don't have that same knowledge that a dedicated tech will have.
And I mean, the reason that I started where I started is, the additional problem is that if you go online and describe the issue in like 3 sentences or less to, Reddit, Airsoft, or wherever, they're going to give you, like, some people will give you a sensible solution, right? Try, soft loading your mags and then come back to me and tell me what's happening. But like, someone will post, oh my God, I had this exact same issue. And like, I took the 42nd tooth off of this gear and it fixed it. And that, doesn't actually necessarily work unless you have a particular super weird problem. Like, I know one of the common solutions that Phil was told a couple of times was to put a harder return spring on his nozzle. And like, that does resolve that issue if some things specifically are causing it. But I promise you, it's not going to fix the issue that the gearbox you are using cannot completely correctly align. It's off by like, a quarter of a millimeter, and it's always going to be because it doesn't fit in your gearbox.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, totally. Like, and as exactly we have found out, right? And that's the problem with airsoft in that respect, especially when you start looking at aftermarket solutions and stuff. Everything varies so wildly, right? There is no one solution, and even a tech. I mean, like, I mean, I'm not trying to talk shit or anything like that, but I think you were stumped for a while looking at this problem. Right?
I'll be honest with you. I kept banging my head off of that for ages. I ran out of ideas. I, to be completely honest, had never thought about or encountered the idea that like you could get a gearbox shell that would fit in a gun body, but just not quite work until I started messing around with HPA stuff. And it came up in a like, oh, by the way, don't try this combination of things because it will not function. And I went, hang on.
Yeah.
And then I said a bunch of very rude things. And then I went and started playing with the problem again.
Yeah.
That's the reality of airsoft tech work. But it's also, a thing to be aware of. Now, I do want to say, like, if your gun stops working, take it apart, see if you can figure out why. Right? Because honestly, if you're not swapping around the gearbox or doing complicated parts changes or complicated builds, most of this is the sort of thing that you can, watch a few hours of YouTube videos, spend a few hours being frustrated, taking your gun apart and putting it together again, and still get, make progress. You can develop these skills, right? Like,
Yeah.
as frankly most techs have. Like, there's no, there's a distinct paucity of courses on how to repair airsoft guns, right?
Yeah, totally. Like, no one is professionally trained
Yeah.
to, work on airsoft gearboxes. Even like I think about like Sam on our Discord, who's like a legit rocket scientist. I don't think he has any specific courses under his belt on airsoft teching, right? Certainly not accredited courses.
I mean, frankly, I imagine he finds this more irritating even than I do. Like, I'm an English teacher, so when, the gearbox is off by 0.5 millimeter and it ruins my, year and a half, oh well, that's a pain in the ass. But like, at least I'm not used to things that are mechanically tooled with extreme precision going together. Like, he works on rockets. I assume the tolerances are very tight.
Yeah. So to come back to the question, I would start with the mags, like Pat said. Start with the mags. If that doesn't work, try look like cleaning your barrel, cleaning your hop-up unit. And if that doesn't work, I mean, ideally talk to a tech or someone who who didn't know stuff about gearboxes, and go from there. There could be a million different solutions.
Always remember that the point at which you want to hit it with a hammer is the point at which you should walk away from it, not the point at which you should hit it with a hammer. And
don't despair. If you need to do your own tech work, there's tons of resources out there. Don't be afraid. Just educate yourself first. And, as they say in, when it comes to construction, like measure twice and cut once, right? Just be sure of yourself before you dive into it. But once you have the education, like have a bit of confidence, dive into it, and hopefully you can resolve your own issue. So good luck. And like Pat said, like jump in the Discord if you want some like direct support.
We'll attempt to provide.
Yeah. Next question is much more direct. It's simply, what brand and weight BBs do you use? So to answer this question, we have used a variety of different BBs over the years. The biggest one that we've used most frequently as a team is Mad Bull Bio BBs. We use the Mad Bull 0.3s and 0.32s for many, many years. And the only reason that we moved away from using them in the last year is simply because they were just not available in Canada. Like, we just could not get them.
We definitely wanted them. It's just, our supplier went, no, I can't get them anymore. Sorry.
Yeah, and so we would buy them in bulk from our supplier, airsoftparts.ca, and they just could not get them for a long while. So another one that we used is, again, in weight is 0.3, 0.32. Really, for our money, like, we're not using anything below 0.3 or 0.32. For the fields that we play on, for the amount of wind that we get in Newfoundland, and also, I mean, for the power of the guns that we're running, it really makes very little sense to be running anything less than 0.3.
Yeah, I keep a bag of 0.28s around for my Tokyo Marui sidearms. They don't really like much heavier than that. But I also go through, 300 of those a year. Right? I don't fire my pistol a lot.
I put 2.5s in my pistol as well, and I put 2.5s in my grenades.
Totally, 2.5s
I use literally. Yeah.
Yeah, 2.5s are completely fine as well for your sidearm. Like, I have a bag of 2.8s that I was using for I don't remember what, honestly, and I just keep using them. There you go. They're there. Yeah. When I run out, I will decide maybe whether I want to get lighter BBs for my sidearm or not.
And for my tornado grenades, like, I'll use whatever Milord's cheapest, finest, like 0.25 BBs, because it really doesn't matter. Like, for that stuff, it's not going through a barrel. Like, it's just exiting a grenade that I'm forcibly throwing on the field, like 30 to 60 feet away, depending on how strong my... I don't particularly care.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think there's a valuable distinction, honestly, between that and just going to Walmart and buying, like, whatever Walmart 0.2s or 0.18s they have will do fine. Your grenade BBs should be the cheapest BBs you can find.
Yeah,
really.
Totally.
That's for throwing grenades. For grenades that are going, like launcher grenades, you do actually want to use decent ones because you don't want to tear your O-rings up. And the Walmart brand BBs often have a very visible seam around them because they're they're single polished, if we're being liberal, as opposed to your like triple or quadruple polished actual like standard BB that you're shooting at your airsoft gun. So don't mix those two; it won't go super well.
Other BBs that we've used the Griffin Bbs from B Squared Airsoft. They're a Canadian company, and I'm pretty sure they're just Green Devils that are rebranded by them, I think, or something like that. But they come in a cool bottle that looks like a Jägermeister bottle, which is kind of neat.
And they're super serviceable. They work.
They're
great.
totally serviceable.
You know, they've caused no issues for our guns. You know, I think Steph in his bolt action and Mark when he was running his super high FPS setup also were running like 0.4s from Mad Bull. You know, which is potentially valuable. But for most of our operative uses, like between 0.28 and 0.32 is probably fine. If you're using an R-hop, you want to be 0.3 or higher usually. So that's sort of where we've ended up. I know Phil and I certainly used 0.28s for a really long time before we started R-hopping our guns as a measure to deal with the brush where we were playing and to deal with the wind here. So the 0.3s, you know, they don't cost enough more for it to be a bad idea for you to go up to them generally, and that's kind of where we are with them. Yeah.
The other brand that we were looking at, and we did a bulk order. Again, like for us as a team, it makes a lot of sense to do bulk orders for ammo because most places in Canada offer like free shipping, right? Which is highly, highly sought after since BB orders are very weighty.
Yeah, especially if you're ordering like 15, 20, 30, 40 bags of 0.3s.
Totally. So we did, our last order, I think, was like 20 bags of like BLS ammo. And BLS is a new type of ammo that we want to try. Actually, Jordan Glickman put me on them. And apparently they were, you know, really well. And again, totally serviceable. For my money, the Mad Bulls are easily the best BB that I've ever used.
Definitely. But like, I'll be honest, I think that might be to some extent affection on both of our parts, having used them for a long time and just sort of like feeling that they're a very consistently good product. The Griffins, like I ran 4,000 of them through my rifle. Didn't have to clean the barrel other than like usual maintenance. Caused no issues. You know,
and same thing with the BLS ones. I've gone through probably at this point, I don't know, 6,000 rounds at this point, which is not a lot. Like Jordan will tell you, that's one game for me. But yeah, we shot a lot of bags of those, and again, no build up in the guns. Like they're an excellent product.
Yeah, I'd probably
for sure.
I'd probably buy Mad Bulls if they were available, just because, you know, in the same way that like, you know, I'd pick up the same brand of milk that I've been buying for 20 years rather than reaching 5 extra inches to get another brand of milk. Like it's just,
totally.
You know, this is what I use, whatever. You know, and realistically, you know, you'll know really quickly if you've got a brand that isn't working out for you. I am gonna outright say, the BBs that caused us problems were G&G Bio BBs. Yeah. They were no bueno. Like I wouldn't put them in your grenade launcher. They gummed up everything. They made a huge mess. And it might have been just that batch or something like that, but they're certainly on my no-buy list.
Yeah, there's a lot of BBs out there that are just like really cheaply manufactured. And they have a lot of different problems, not least of which is the inconsistency in the BB itself. Like if there's an air bubble in there, like the residue and all this kind of stuff. With BBs, it's worth spending a little bit extra to get a good product. We've talked about that in a video in the past.
And very pleasantly, you know, there are folks on a lot of forums who have bought a wide variety of BBs and like cut them in half and, you know, crack them open and stuff, and will generally like actually give you a good idea of like, oh, what's actually going on in here? Like this brand has consistently a lot of air bubbles. Okay, that's not very good. This brand has an air bubble, but it's always in the same place. All right, that's fine then. That, you know, that doesn't really matter. So, you know, this brand doesn't have air bubbles at all. Okay, well, yeah, we'll take them then, right? Yeah. But I think that in a general sort of sense, yeah, if you're given, if you're making the choice between a $15 bag and a $25 bag, the $25 bag is often going to be the right choice. Just because, again, you know, I really want, Phil really wants that, like, you know, if we shoot 2 or 3 BBs at you, you should be hit. Right? Mm-hmm. We would, you know, first round hits as often as possible is definitely a goal for us. And like we've talked about the fact that as often as possible is not every time, but still as often as possible, right? If we can get it to 55% or 65% of shots or 85%, fantastic, right? And we're willing to pay $5 a bag more to get 5% more likelihood of that.
And I think it's worth noting too, like as you go up in BB weights, like 0.3 and above, certainly, it becomes less and less frequent for you to find really bad quality BBs. But when you look at the lower weights, especially like 0.2, and you should never ever go below 0.2, but you can find BBs like Pat was saying before that are just basically cast and they just come right out of the mold. They're not polished at all. They have a seam line. They got a bubble in there. And that can actually even damage your kit, right? It can damage your gun. It can damage your hop up. It can damage your barrel. So it's worth staying away from those. But if you're using 0.3s or 0.32s or even like 3.6s or whatever, it's very unlikely that you're going to find a product that's not at least like single polish, probably double polish, that you're going to be damaging your gun with. It's very unlikely. But really where you're going to see the difference is in the actual density of the BB and like if there is an air bubble in there and is it centered and all this kind of stuff, right? And like Pat said, it's worth spending it. If you're going to be buying a bag of 0.3s anyway, like you probably can afford to spend an extra couple dollars on a bag of better stuff, right?
And, it's really a matter of finding like a brand that is consistently good, which is, again, like I said, I'd buy any of the 3 brands that we've used in the last 5 years very happily. I think roughly in order of that Phil presented them, in the sense that I like the Mad Bull ones. I found I did enjoy the packaging on the Griffin ones, and they worked super great. So they'd probably be my next choice. But all of them function, at minimum, perfectly fine.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks for the question. Next one that we have here. Hey guys, just a general question for you. What should you do if you play in the rain and your gear and guns get wet? Some people say you should take your entire gun apart and dry it all, but that seems like a lot of work. What do you guys do? Well, you should never do what I do. Like whatever I do, just do not do that thing. It's probably not a good idea.
I think, all joking aside, that probably taking the whole thing apart and drying it is excessive.
Yeah.
I definitely have an old towel that I use to towel off my gear when I come in from like playing in the actual rain, like, or the, drizzle or whatever. And that's more about not wanting, the parts of my gun that are sort of steel to not rust, it's a relatively easy piece of maintenance. Use an old towel. Your mom/girlfriend/wife will be less pissed off with you. Do not use a brand new towel. People will get pissed. The oil and rust spots are noticeable. You get in trouble. Don't ask how I know. The actual, like, your fabric gear, wash it, right? Let it dry, put it in the washer, done. Or let it dry and don't put it in the washer and be greasy, whatever.
Pat means, and by fabric you mean like your clothing, like your BDU top and bottom, your socks and stuff like that. Not like your plate carrier or your chest rig or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, when you come in from any game day, you should be stripping down, like, take your mags out of your gear, out of your chest rig or whatever you carry them in, empty them, check them to make sure they're not, not functioning in any way, haven't acquired any actual damage, stack them up on a shelf or something, however you want to keep them. I don't care. If you've been playing in the rain, do not put them back in your chest rig. Give your chest rig a day or 2 to dry out. Don't put your chest rig in a box. Keep it out so that there's air circulation, so that it doesn't get moldy, because you do not want mold growing in your airsoft gear.
Like hang it up and put it in a closet or something like that. Like that's fine.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be like on a clothes drying rack in the middle of the room. Like,
totally. I mean,
just
like,
hung up in a closet is fine.
I'll be honest with you. Like, if I come back from airsoft on a rainy day, like, it's probably getting tossed on the floor or on the couch in my man cave and just like left there to dry overnight, and that's fine. It doesn't require like a whole lot of TLC to keep your Cordura from getting gross. Just like, don't leave it in a box damp for 2 weeks. You'll regret that terribly, especially if it was expensive gear. Boots, same kind of thing, right? Make sure they dry out. Make sure that anything dries out. In terms of your primary sort of rifles, like, dry it off. If there's anything that could rust on it that you're super concerned about, you could toss a light lubricant on it if you really want to. But that's more of a like long to mid-term storage. Like, my guns I'm not using over the winter are in that situation. My M27 is not, because it's literally in the room next to me, behind me on a thing right now, so that I can pick it up and go do some ready ups whenever I'm like leaving the room in not a hurry. So it's like, oh, well, I don't need to worry about that rusting without me noticing. I'll just maintain it, day to day, because it's in my, used space. But don't be like, oh, I went and got gun oil and put that on my gun. You don't need to. Like it does not require, definitely. These do not require heavy maintenance in that way, unless you live somewhere where like it's super damp all year round and you're storing it in that kind of situation. My gas gun, I pretty much will, I'd be lying if I said I did it right after the game, but usually like within 24 hours of playing Airsoft, I take it down and lube it and put it back together anyway. So that covers the preventive maintenance for that. But I mean, I do dry it off if I come in and it's been raining, because I'm already drying off my other gun and it's literally hanging off me. So why not? Right.
I joked at this. Sorry.
No, go
ahead. I said, I joked at the start, like, don't do what I do, because I'll be honest, I don't do any of that. Like, I'll hang up. Sorry. Well, I mean, I do some of it. Like, I wash my kit. I dry my gear. I put my chest rig up to dry in the closet, all this kind of stuff. I'll wipe my gun down and I hang it on my gun wall, and that's basically it. I don't do anything with my sidearm, and I've never really had any trouble. But as well, like, we don't play in situations like if you live in the northeastern United States, or like in Vancouver or on the West Coast or whatever, where it's like pouring rain and stuff. Like, we don't play in conditions like that typically. So my gun has never been submerged in water.
Yeah, I mean...
So, yeah, like a cursory wipe down is pretty much the only thing that I've ever really only felt that I needed.
I mean, we've gotten, like, the most I think any of our team's gear has really seen is, we get days here where there's sort of like consistent, really heavy drizzle that soaks you pretty thoroughly in a couple hours. So we've definitely played in situations where that was the case, But I mean, for the most part here, yeah, you won't get a ton of water on your gun anyway, right? You're certainly not, looking at like Florida rainstorms or anything.
So like, do you need to like take down your gun and like your gearbox and stuff and dry it all out? Like, no. Like, you really, the likelihood of you needing to do that in the course of a regular Airsoft game is basically minimal.
And realistically, honestly, even in the face of like pretty significant rain, your gun is going to be, close enough to watertight that you shouldn't have water inside the internal workings of your gun unless something has gone pretty wrong. And also, if you do end up in a situation where you think there's a significant amount of water inside your gun, do not pull the trigger. It runs on electricity. You'll short the thing out. Like, wait, let it dry out, right? But like, if your gun is flooded internally, you probably do need to take it down and dry it out and then put it back together again before you use it. But also, that shouldn't happen. Like, the only way that's happening that I can conceive of is if you like fall into water and your gun becomes submerged for like an amount of time. And if that does occur, then really I feel like you've got other issues.
Yeah, just haul the battery out and let it dry out. Throw it in a bag of rice if you've got a bag of rice big enough.
Yeah, go to Costco, buy a sack of rice, put gun inside of sack.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think I would sort of echo what Pat was saying. Like, don't overthink it. Like, there's certainly things you can do. You can lube your guns and stuff, but do you need to take them down, to the studs, so to speak? Like, no, you don't.
And to be clear, like,
dry it down.
When I'm saying like I lube parts of my gun, like I'm tossing lubricant on like the pieces that I know will rust because I know they're made out of pot metal, right? Like, if you're buying an Airsoft rail system, the screws on it are probably made of garbage metal, so like they'll rust. If you don't want them to rust, then spray paint over them. If you see them rusting, spray paint over them again, or alternately put some lubricant on them, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, fair enough.
But like, that's cosmetic and irrelevant largely.
Yeah. Next question we have here. Hey guys, I need a bit of help. I'm 5'9" and I've had trouble finding an M4 replica that is really comfortable. I know Phil said he's shorter than me, so I'm curious what you guys use.
I think you should get an M16, preferably one of the grenade launcher ones like the Punisher uses. This is Pat's bad advice for the day.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So I mean, yes, it's true. Like, so this guy says he's 5'9". I'm 5'6" approximately. And so I actually use a full length M4 rifle, and I find it totally fine. So a lot of the comfort with the M4 I find has to do, or well, I mean, with any rifle that you're shooting, has to do with how you're setting up, for example, the buttstock. So making sure that when you're holding the pistol grip and you're holding the rifle vertically, the buttstock is resting in the crook of your elbow. That's like the proper distance for the adjustment of your buttstock that gives you the right length of pull, all this kind of stuff.
There's a lot of value to actually using how well these things are designed in terms of setting up your ergonomics. Speaking as someone who didn't for a really long time.
I mean, both of us. I mean, neither of us are real steel shooters, so like you don't really know until someone actually tells you. It's like, no, hey, this is how you're supposed to do it.
You're totally right, but like at the same time, I know I ran my Scar stock collapsed all the way for pretty much the entire time I ran the Scar, and I'm 6'2" and I have orangutan arms. Like this was a terrible decision.
Yeah, well, I mean, fair enough. But so yeah, so you want to extend your stock as much as you can, and make sure that it sort of rests in the crook of your arm. And then in terms of the length of the rifle, I mean, yeah, like if you're shorter, obviously you don't have as much reach. So if you have a really, really long rail, it's going to be hard for you to grip it as far forward as you really want to. It's going to make it harder for you to hold the rifle up in a shooting position for long periods of time without getting fatigued, all this kind of stuff. But that being said, I mean, this is airsoft. Like, you're always going to have opportunities to, drop your rifle off target, to rest for, a second in between things without, endangering your own life or what have you. And so I find that for me, the extra length that I have on the rifle, even though it's like a full length since we made the barrel longer and all this kind of stuff if you listen to some of the other podcasts, we're talking about me problem solving the issues we were having. Point is, I have a really long rifle. I actually have a mount for a GoPro that's facing me for some of our videos. I have an underslung mount for another camera, like a scope cam on the front of, and I've got my actual foregrip, and it's totally fine, right? Even though I'm shorter, I have this longer rifle. So personally, what I would suggest is if you find that it's not really comfortable for you, I would actually get you to adjust your rifle, adjust the stock, and find a position that's a bit more comfortable and see if that helps. Because quite frankly, if you're taller than me, you can use the rifle length that I'm using comfortably. I'm using it comfortably now. I'm 5'6", so you can use a full length M4 and you should be absolutely fine. Unless, I mean, and you don't really say this in your post, unless you mean that the rifle you're using is too short, right? Like you're using like a 10-inch shorty CQB sort of M4. In which case, I mean, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, Mark
but
18
like,
is
just
not
get a longer gun.
A Mark 18 is not an adequately long rifle for Pat. See the aforementioned orangutan arms. But like, it's also worth noting here, I think, Phil and Chris, and after consultation with them and many repeated telling me I'm being dumb, I have all swapped to a pretty thin line stock for our M4s for ease of shoulder transitions and maneuvering around sort of the gear we have on our chests and our slings and stuff. And I could definitely see how having a really like super fat stock, like the stock that came on my M27 is huge, and it's super padded, and I could definitely see it being an asset for like a real steel shooter shooting that rifle. The airsoft gun that I use does not have any recoil, obviously, so I have switched to a thin, super light one, and it is non-trivially more comfortable. And I feel like that could be an angle to explore if, you're sure you do have it at sort of the right length. You might also want to think about, I know Phil got a riser for his optic when he switched to the longer rifle as well. And like, these are things that you can do to alter some of the profile of how you hold the rifle in ways that will make it more comfortable, that aren't really going, oh man, the rifle's too big, so much as they're going, I can adjust this to be better for what I am doing. And I think that's a useful approach to take.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things Pat didn't mention just now is the sling. Your sling can also help, right? Like, we think about the slings in a lot of cases is like this cool guy attachment that you can get so you can, you can do a whole bunch of stuff, but really a sling is a shooting aid. And one thing you absolutely can do if you've got, for example, a 2-point sling that has a lot of slack, is you can actually take your support hand, so the hand that is holding the front of your rifle, and wrap it through the sling and make it very, very tight, and use that as an additional support. and it's something that real steel shooters have done. When I used to shoot small bore Olympic style, we used to do that all the time with our 2-point slings. We would wrap our hands around the sling until it got so tight around our hands that you basically couldn't move, and it just held the rifle there. That's perfect, right? You have very little muscle use to try and hold it up. It's really just sort of hanging out there by virtue of how tight the sling is, and that's great. So there's a lot that you can do, like Pat was saying, with different, accessories and stuff that can help make the rifle more comfortable for you. Unfortunately, this individual didn't say in his comment how he found specifically the M4 not comfortable, but whether it's an M4 or any type of rifle, take a bit of time to see like what exactly is it that you find that's not comfortable, and see if there's ways that you can swap it out. And sometimes it can be as easy as putting a pistol grip instead of a rifle grip, or vice versa. There's a lot of different options out there.
Even like your foregrip can make a big difference. Like I use a vertical foregrip. I have used angled foregrips and I hate them. But I have teammates who use angled foregrips exclusively and find them super comfortable. And it's just, different length of arms, different person.
Yeah. So give it a shot. I mean, you're talking about M4s, so adjust the stock a little bit out. See what your hand position is on the front of your rifle. See if you can, use a sling to help accommodate that. You can use a riser, etc. But there's an M4 out there, I would say, for everybody, for every body type, whether you're 5'9", 5'6", whether you're 6'4", it doesn't really matter.
For sure.
So it's just about finding that customized adjustment that fits your particular profile.
No,
and the last question that we have here: what is the most painful airsoft injury you've had, either directly from getting hit or while playing?
Honestly, so I spent a really long time having issues with my knees and my ankles due to it turns out after a bunch of years of trying to figure it out, due to basically the way I walk being ergonomically poor. And I needed insoles for it. And man, torquing your knee and smashing your face off the ground is not super fun. I don't recommend it. But I think there was a period there where I basically rolled my ankle every weekend that I played Airsoft, and that sucked. And was way worse than any like direct injury. Other than that, I've got a scar on my nose from someone shooting me from about like 8 feet away with a 500 FPS revolver, and that like definitely hurt quite a lot.
Yeah, I remember that too.
But like,
and we've talked about it in the podcast before, like you walking off the field with a bloody nose and be like, what happened? And some guy like just had a revolver like 2 inches away from your face or whatever.
Yeah, I definitely saw red on that one, and more from pain than from anger. But like, I feel like both of those are probably outliers from most people's regularly played experience. Getting shot in the ear sucks. I think that's probably it for me.
I think there's two things that stand out. One, many years ago, we were playing up at Red Cliff, and I was sneaking up to a window in the octagon, and I was crouched down. I was actually squat down in a full squat, and I had my rifle pointed up to like the window or whatever, and John's dad popped out and surprised me. And he shot me, probably I'm going to say from like 3 feet away, with his Thompson, and he hit me in the lip.
Oof.
And because back then we didn't wear any face pro, we just wore iPro. So he hit me in the lip, and it hurt a lot. But because he startled me, I fell backwards, and he just kept shooting at me. And as a result of the position that I was in, I went from a prone position, from a squat position to a supine position, which is to say I was on my back with both of my legs in the air, and the rest of the burst that was aimed at my face now hit me right in the testicles. And that was very, very painful and also embarrassing. You're hurting, and your ego is also hurting. Yeah, but that was the first time actually. Once I had sort of recovered from that and he had stopped laughing, that was the first time actually that I thought that maybe I had a BB stuck in my face, because I could feel how swollen my lip felt.
I remember the fat lip.
And like I was like, is there a BB stuck in there? And there wasn't. That wouldn't happen until Johnny many years later. But I really felt like it was possible that there was something stuck in there. That was the first
Phil just
one.
had a nice permanent pouty lip on the go. It was good.
Yeah, for like, I don't know, like a week or something. That's probably the worst direct airsoft injury. But I would say the close runner-up would be a few years ago. Chris and I were playing some sort of game at Frontline. And the game whistle blew. And we started running towards, like, we were like, oh, we're going to move to one of the houses or whatever. So we started running full tilt. And my feet caught in the AstroTurf.
Oh, yeah.
And I fell forward with, like, full force. And I smashed my torso off the deck. And at the time, I was wearing still my JPC with my training plates. And so when that happened, it knocked the wind completely out of me.
I think you bruised a rib, didn't you?
No, so this is the thing, right? So I fell down and they knocked the wind out of me. Like they blew the whistle. They were like, oh my God, Phil, are you okay? And I couldn't breathe for a second. I had to catch my breath and I got up. Chris ripped my plate carrier off me and I recovered. And then I was like, oh yeah, okay. And it's fine. So after, I'm going to say like 10 minutes, I was okay. I put the plate carrier back on and we kept carrying on. And then every time I would bend over, I was in pain. I was like, oh man, this hurts. It's because I'd fractured a rib.
Oof. Yeah.
I'd fractured the rib from the impact of just basically crushing my chest from a full bore run. But it wasn't a full fracture. It was only a hairline fracture. It's not until like 10 days later when I was in my basement and I sneezed that I actually broke the rib fully. I felt it pop in my chest when I sneezed like an old man. And at that point, I was like, oh yeah, okay, there's the pain. Yeah. But yeah, like, and that's the kind of thing that can happen to anybody, right? I mean, if you're rolling around and you're wearing plates or anything like that, you can very, very easily injure yourself like that, right? So if you think about people talking about wearing like bulletproof, well, not bulletproof, but like like the ballistic plates or whatever, getting shot and like breaking a rib, that's essentially what happened. Except that the kinetic force was delivered not from someone shooting me or my plate being hit by some sort of bullet, but just me actually embracing Newton's law of gravity and smashing my chest full force into the deck, right, as we were playing a game.
Just hitting the deck super hard.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I think that's less embarrassing, I think, than getting shot in the testicles by John's dad. But certainly overall more painful, and mostly because there's a longer recovery time, right? Like I had a fat lip and I had a bruised ego for like, I don't know, like 2 hours and a fat lip for a week, as opposed to, oh, so now you have a fractured rib for 3 weeks or more, right? And that kind of
That's more of a longer term inconvenience, right?
Yeah. That being said, I would say we have both been very fortunate in that we haven't had really bad airsoft injuries. One of the guys on our team took a really bad fall and he fractured his leg in 7 different places. And he had to have like extensive surgery to have his leg fixed.
He's definitely the quote unquote winner of the bad airsoft injury, schema within our crew, but I also can't recommend doing that. I think he'd rather not be the winner of that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is hands down the worst injury I've ever heard of at an airsoft field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, where someone...
That was extremely improbable, but also extremely bad.
Yeah. His tibula and fibula both fractured, like 4 places in one, 3 places in the other. Paramedics had to come and like literally drive their ambulance up to the field and like take him off and go to the hospital, orthopedic surgery for, many rounds. He's got plates in his legs, like it's horrible. And all that was from jumping off. Yeah, well, I mean, it sort of terminated his airsoft career because we haven't, been able to play with him since then.
And you can understand why he would be like, maybe not.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
But
and that's really a freak accident. Like he was jumping off a short wall, like it was like a 12-inch drop.
I mean, you also got to give him huge props. Like he took that like a champ. In the sense that like he really, has recovered very fully, and I just want to give him the shout out for like pushing through the discomfort of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it for the Q&A this week. That's all the questions we had. keep the questions coming. It's always fun to do one of these every now and then. Breaks up the chatter from me and Pat just talking and rambling on about one particular subject.
I like rambling.
But yeah, so if you have any questions, or like we were saying before, if you want any help with any of your tech work or anything like that, anything in between, anything Airsoft related, come join us on the Discord. We have great conversations going on every single day. People helping people. It's a really fun place to be. We're very fortunate to be able to be part of that. So come join us on the Discord. If you have any other questions, make sure you can drop them in the Discord. You can drop them on YouTube. You can also email us. And we'll be happy to answer them in these types of podcasts in the future. But until that time, that's all we got for you. And we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.